Ladies and gentlemen, and esteemed listeners, welcome to Radio Renaissance. My name is Jared Taylor, and I'm your host. And with me is my indispensable co-host, Paul Kersey. I hope you're doing spiffingly today, Mr. Kersey.
Mr. Taylor, I am. I've been watching the news of the U.S. Senator who was just arrested as he tried to question the DHS Secretary Noem during a press conference.
Pretty exciting. That was pretty exciting. Lots of arrests need to be done. But let's begin with comments, as we usually do. A listener writes in to say, last week you mentioned the John Lewis class of fleet replenishment oilers. This class of tankers can carry 162,000 barrels of diesel ship fuel, aviation fuel, and dry store cargoes to keep Navy vessels operating at sea without having to put into port. Very useful if you're doing overseas activity. You mentioned that the oiler Harvey Milk, named after a homosexual politician in San Francisco, is going to be renamed. You also mentioned several others in that class: the Earl Warren, the Lucy Stone, the Sojourner Truth, Thurgood Marshall, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The Ginsburg is now under construction. You didn't seem to know who Lucy Stone was, so I will tell you. She was a suffragist and abolitionist. She was the first Massachusetts woman to earn a college degree, and she defied gender norms when she famously wrote marriage vows to reflect her egalitarian views, and she also refused to take her husband's last name. It'd be interesting to know what her vows actually bound her to do. I'm sure they did not bind her to obey her husband. In any case, she died in 1893 at age 75. I'm sure her name spurs on the cruise ship to a great patriotic effort. Another comment, while discussing last week Trump's administration's decision to rename the USS Harvey Milk, you omitted to mention that in addition to being an extreme homosexual activist, Mr. Milk was a well-known and admitted pederast. There is an article at The Federalist called Media Democrats Breathlessly Defend Having Naval Ship Named After Gay Pederast. I found this link with just a cursory search, and there was also a pretty funny Snopes article attempting to split hairs over the definition of pedophile or pederast. In any case, there is an investigation by the American Family Association that mentioned the multiple suicides of Milk's former victims, including one that took place at his own home, and his cruel indifference to their well-being. Well, I didn't know all that about Harvey Milk. I assume your sources are reliable. All the more reason to strip his name from a U.S. naval vessel. Another comment. Last week, you mentioned New Hampshire State Rep. Travis Corcoran. You notoriously noted that all of the data that I read indicate that violence isn't associated with the presence of guns, but with the presence of African Americans. Blacks commit violent crimes at 5 to 10 times the rate of whites. Of course, the headline said he claimed that blacks commit all the violent crime. He never said such a thing. He's just talking about proportions, which is the sensible approach to take. Our listener writes in, of course, he's correct. In 2024, blacks committed violence at about 8 times the violent rate of the rest of the population. Now, Mr. Kersey went on to read an article that tried to explain this in the usual silly, dishonest way. If you control for education, poverty, etc., the statistics show that whites are no different from blacks. Hence, it's not a race thing. It's a poverty thing. It's an undernourishment. It's an underprivileged thing, etc., etc. I don't doubt the statistics, says our listener, but the conclusion is dead wrong. I don't even necessarily accept the statistics. Even if you control for all of these things, usually there is some residual that shows that blacks are more violent, even if you control for everything that you can think of, even including IQ. In any case, our listener goes on to say, brain-dead zombie academics love to look at this statistic and say, poverty causes crime. I don't believe it. You could easily support the opposite conclusion. Crime causes poverty. Well, yes, if you've been in and out of jail until you're about 35 years of age, chances are you're going to be poor and you're not going to have a profession that's going to get you out of poverty. Our listener says, I suspect the real reason is a hidden variable. Degeneracy causes poverty, educational failure, and crime. The statistics are completely consistent with the idea that on the whole, blacks are more likely to be degenerate than whites, and crime rates are high among degenerates regardless of race. That degeneracy is an interesting way of putting it. I suppose that's meant to include low IQ, psychopathic tendency, ability to defer gratification, etc. But degeneracy, that's a word that we should use more frequently. Another comment. I was happy as you were to see Donald Trump confront Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa and give him a long overdue lecture on his country's anti-white rampage. The media reaction of debunked conspiracy theories and false claims, etc., was not unexpected. Surely there must be a simple and easily understood statistical analysis, an international crime report, or concise source of some kind that briefly reports and tabulates the attacks and the farm killings. I looked around a bit and I couldn't find what I was looking for. Is there anything you can recommend? The fact is, I don't know of anything, and part of the problem is South Africa keeps such terrible, poor statistics. The blacks are always saying, oh, black people are just as likely to be murdered as white farmers. The fact is, yes, that's true, but black people live around black people, and that's one of the most dangerous things to do. White people don't live around black people. They live out in the countryside and the farms, and they get singled out for attack because they're white. I think there's very little doubt about that among people who take any of this stuff seriously. But the trouble is, there are no good statistics that I'm aware of. The listener also writes in to say someone should just ask the white South African refugees why they left. Well, I think there was some of that, wasn't there? I believe when they were welcomed, one of the American officials who was at the airbase where they were flown in said something about the horrible experiences they'd gone through. But Mr. Kersey, had you seen any report on any kind of anti-white criminality that they had suffered?
No, we haven't heard much from the Afrikaners who've been brought over here yet. And that's a good thing. They should just go ahead and immerse themselves within the American life, and we can interview them later as more and more come. But the only person we've really heard from is Retief Goosen, the golf player who the president of South Africa brought with him, the white golfer, to the infamous meeting at the White House, and who could confirm that, yeah, I know family members and neighbors and friends who have been killed in these farm attacks. So it's anecdotal, but you're right. There are a couple books that have tried to document it all, and there are no official statistics. It's just, oh, this is how many murders are in South Africa per year. I think it's like 27,000. It's an obscene number, but it's not broken down, like you've said, by race.
Well, and even if it is, whites and the blacks, certainly the white farmers, do not by any means live in the same environments where black murder victims live. And if you say, I don't know, say blacks are being killed at the rate of 100 per 100,000, something like that, and white farmers are being killed at no higher, 100 per 100,000, that in effect means that white farmers are terribly singled out because they're just not around blacks ordinarily. Certainly not the most dangerous blacks that lives in the cities. So nobody's done a proper statistical study of it. I wish someone, maybe we have listeners in South Africa, I know we do, someone should really buckle down and do that. Let's see, another comment. Is it your opinion that Trump's response to this latest assault by the anti-white left in Los Angeles will work to weaken the left, or will it strengthen the left? I'm increasingly worried that all of the action coming from the Trump administration will only get us more retributive anti-white policy action once we have Democrats back in control, which is likely to happen next election. Even if it doesn't, liberals will eventually reclaim hegemony. What then? It's exciting to see Trump fighting back, but I'm fearful it's too little, too late, and the other side is too powerful. Well, that's a counsel of despair, if I ever heard one. Gee, the other side might get back in the saddle someday, so let's just tippy-toe around the problem. It's all very well to be vigorous about this, but that just make them angry. No, we need to do absolutely as much as we possibly can. And yes, maybe the liberals will be back in power at some point. But the idea is, if we just play nice, and just very carefully go about trying to dismantle DEI while we have the chance, then maybe they won't build it back all the more strong. No, I think we should do absolutely everything we can while we can. And who knows, maybe Vance will be the next president. The idea that, oh no, we need to whisper about this stuff for fear that it might make them angry. I think that's 100% and completely wrong. What do you think, Mr. Kersey?
Oh, I think that one illegal alien in the United States of America is a threat to our national sovereignty. Oh, with estimates showing that 20 million plus came in during my administration alone, and knowing that there have been estimates back in the 1980s that there were 20 million illegal aliens then. I think I've seen estimates anywhere from 30 to 40 million before 2021.
Well, but you're not answering his question. Your question is.
I mean, no. What I'm saying is this is an existential moment for the country, and Trump he can't give an inch. Like today, Mr. Taylor, he gave a speech. We're recording this on June 12th, 2025, where he said that he's going to instruct the DHS and ICE not to go after farms and hotels where there are a lot of illegal aliens, and that's capitulation. You can't
What?
acquiesce.
No. Good.
No.
Not to hotels and what? Farms?
Farms, yes, sir. No, people need to understand that this is the moment where you have to
Well,
start arresting
yes.
employers, and you'll see self-deportation. There
I
has
would
to be a
say,
course correction.
maybe not farms and hotels now, but once we've gotten everybody out of the Home Depot parking lots, once we've got everybody out of the meatpacking companies, then farms, then churches, you name it. There should be no off-limits places.
Exactly.
Let's see. Okay, comment. What do you think of non-white foreign exchange students? It seems to me they're perfectly fine. We can keep track of these people, and I believe we can learn valuable things from non-Europeans. I guess he's talking about exchange students who might be high school students, maybe college students. I think we can learn an awful lot from Europeans. How many people have actually met an Estonian or a Croatian or, for that matter, an Austrian? I think if we're talking about learning from foreign students, we can certainly learn a lot from Europeans. And if we have non-whites coming over, I would rather they be high school students, not college students. College students, they might end up marrying Americans, and the less of that happens, the better. I want America to be, as to the extent possible, a European country. And if we're going to be learning from foreign students, I think we can learn a great deal, all we need really, from European foreigners. What about South Africans, South African whites, New Zealanders? I mean, these people would have an enormous amount to share, a lot of insights, a lot of experiences that Americans know nothing about. I think we can learn a lot from them. And now here's a difficult question. What do you think is the best historical analog of our current situation in the West? What lesson from past movements do you think is the most critical that we learn? And what precedent, if any, can we look to as a hopeful example for people reasserting itself in its native land? Well, what white people are doing, of course, while they are majorities in the nations of their origin, giving them away, capitulating like that, there are no historical analogs. No nation has ever done that. People talk about the Roman Empire, importing people. Well, that was over a long period of time. The circumstances were certainly different. And it's not as though they were unable to fight off or didn't try to fight off the barbarian invasions when the barbarians were invading. But what a nation that has the capability, the wealth, the manpower, the military to close its borders and keep invaders out and refuses to do so just because they're walking across the border without carrying rifles, there are no historical precedents. And it seems to me if there's a hopeful example of a people reclaiming itself and what it calls its native land, that would probably be Israel. That is a nation that said, okay, we need a Jewish state. We're Jews. We need a state of our own, and we're going to do what it takes. And there is something about that spirit that I think is behind the remigration movement that we see in Europe. We are a people. We need a home of our own. We're living right in it, and we have to make sure that it stays our home. And that means people who are not like us have got to scram. Any ideas on that one, Mr. Kersey?
That's a really good question because you're right. I can't think of any historical parallels. In San Domingo was settled by the French, and then they imported how many slaves? I mean, I guess you could say this isn't a slave rebellion type situation. This is just a situation of a lack of a will to.
That's a lack of will.
And that's it. And so I can't think of any other example except the one you mentioned. But again, we're watching it in real time where Americans are just ceding territory. And that's going to be one of the key aspects of this podcast today, is talking about what we're witnessing in places that were overwhelmingly white in 1950. 1960, right. Talking about Los Angeles and seeing just how we are living in an alien nation. And I think we're going to see a lot of that this weekend. That's going to shock people in regards to some of these massive No Kings rally that we're seeing, the Walmart Heiress Fund.
Well, we will see. But again, we don't have historical guides because no people ever in history has been denatured and browbeaten and demoralized and had their backbones removed the way that has happened to white people. Here's another comment. I think before it's too late, white people need to get busy having white babies. I suggest that each white married couple have 5. Well, that's great, but easier said than done. Yep. All you white couples out there have at least 5 white babies. No, that would be a great thing. But the whole idea of getting white people to have more babies is a very, very difficult thing. The Hungarians have tried really pretty hard. Some of the Scandinavian countries have tried, and money's not it. Money is not the solution. You have to get people to really change their attitude. You have to give people, I think, a future that is hopeful for them, a future in which they see their children as being part of a proud nation and not a bunch of sniveling losers who are giving their country away to others. It's a huge problem. And feminism plays a huge role in all of this. Okay, just a couple of more comments here. Just as we have seen small-scale relocation within the United States, will we witness a type of white flight in the coming decades from European countries already past the tipping point, such as France or Britain, towards nations that are poorer yet retain their current quality of life and cultural homogeneity? Well, first of all, I hate to think that France and Britain are past the tipping point. I hope that they can pull this problem out of the bag, or at least put the brakes on what's going on. I hope that is possible. But yes, there's already something of that. I know several Frenchmen who've moved to Hungary, for example, and I can think of several Americans who have moved to Hungary. I know one who lives in Ukraine. He moved to Ukraine and he married a Ukrainian woman, a guy who used to work for American Renaissance. He has moved to Croatia. These things are happening. People are leaving parts of the world that used to be white and that are fading to brown, and they are trying to return to a place that is more culturally homogeneous and racially homogeneous. Last question, and this last comment, and this is a correction, and we really appreciate corrections. This one is an important one. In your last podcast, you mentioned net migration into the UK. You said there are nearly 1 million crawling into that small set of islands. Correction. It's more than 1 million. The figure you quoted, 906,000 net migration, that's the sum of immigrants in minus immigrants out. Total immigrants in 2024 was more than 1,112. 1,112,000. That means there were over 1 million minus the 2,000. Gosh, I can't talk. It was 1,112,000 minus the 206,000 people who left. So that meant 906 net inward flow because 200,000 left. It'd be interesting to know who are the Brits who are leaving. I wonder if they're white. I wonder if they are non-whites going back to their homes. Perhaps the listener who made this correction would be kind enough to look into that and let us know. We would be very much obliged. So, Mr. Kersey, you have been following the LA event closely. What is your general commentary? I think we can assume that most of our listeners are familiar with the broad lines of what's happening. What words of wisdom, what commentary do you have on what's happening and what's likely to happen?
Well, I'm going to say two quick things about it so we can move on. One, stay away from these events this weekend. We know that there are hundreds, potentially thousands of American cities where you're going to see these No King events that are going to be well attended. There are going to be a lot of individuals at these waving the Mexican flag, waving all sorts of flags. And I think that to me has been one of the strangest aspects of this situation in Los Angeles, where you've seen, again, they're in a small geographic area, ladies and gentlemen. I've got family in Los Angeles, and I asked, are you guys impacted at all by this? They live in Orange County. And they said, no, not at all. It's in this one little area. You know, if you're not on the 405 or the 101, you're not going to have to deal with the highways being stopped. But the point is, it's the optics. You hear that all the time. And seeing the image of a Mexican shirtless with the Mexican flag in the background, flames rising, pretty powerful image that we live in an alien nation. And Mr. Taylor, it's been 30 years since Peter Brumlow's book, Alien Nation, came out. And I think average Americans are seeing now. It's like, wow, we knew it was bad. You and I pay attention to this stuff, probably more so than most people. And we've seen the demographic data, we've read the books, but now you're seeing those books come to life. You're seeing the Great Replacement in real time. And it's shocking to me to see the level to which the Democrats in the state of California and across the country have gone all in for the rights of illegal aliens, as if they are Americans in waiting, and telling us, oh, if we had just passed border security and comprehensive immigration control back in 2013 or 2006. Well, if we had done that, it would just been mass amnesty. And then we would be talking about another amnesty at this point for Biden's illegal immigrant army that came across the border post-Trump 1.0. And to me, that's the most important thing to understand, is we could have stopped all of this. We're not going to talk about this story, but there was a Washington Post story on May 31st that asked, hey, why is there such little fentanyl coming across the border? It's because our government decided to actually clamp down on border controls. Why are there so few illegal immigrants crossing? These are all problems that can be fixed and solved with the will, if the state decides to utilize state power. And now we're seeing how many illegal aliens there are. I looked this up, and in Los Angeles alone, there are 130,000 gang members, predominantly Hispanic, Latino gangs. 130,000 gang members. That's a small army right there. And I've seen estimates that there are more than 1 million illegal aliens in Los Angeles County alone. I mean, these are shocking numbers, and we're seeing it now come to life. We're seeing the consequences of our failure to address this problem.
Well, it's certainly true that the mainstream media has noticed all the Mexican flags. In fact, there's a New York Times article, and it just wonders. It says, well, here I'll read from it. It says, as images of protests in Southern California have flooded TV and social media, a key question has emerged. Why are so many protesters carrying Mexican flags at an American political protest? And they ask this just with this round-eyed incomprehension. The sea of Mexican flags at anti-deportation protests has been seized upon by conservatives who argue the demonstrators are un-American. And this causes some protesters to consider leaving the flags at home. Well, apparently it hasn't persuaded many of them. We still see seas of Mexican flags. Photos of masked provocateurs wearing Mexican flags atop burning Waymo taxis spread instantly across conservative social media. Well, I want them to spread across all social media. Thank you very much, New York Times. To many Americans, including those on the left, it might seem a bad strategy to fight deportations of illegal immigrants by waving the flag of another country. Not just another country, the country to which they're being deported. Thank you. Excuse me. The protesters said this week they see the Mexican flag as a symbol of defiance against Mr. Trump's immigration policies or of solidarity with other Mexican Americans. What it means, of course, is that their loyalties are not American. These people are not only not American, they are un-American. They are anti-American. They are, in effect, saying Mexicans, and really anyone for that matter, can just waltz into the country and use it as their own, come in and out entirely as they see fit. The United States is not allowed to have a border of its own. Sovereignty for America is some kind of oppression and outrage to the rest of the world. In fact, here's another article about what's going on in Los Angeles that I think is entirely appropriate. And it reminds me of something that was much more common when I started American Renaissance some decades ago. One of the groups organizing the anti-ICE protests in LA wants Mexico to reconquer much of the Southwest, arguing that the U.S. is an illegitimate colonial power. Centro CSO, I wonder what CSO stands for, pushes for the Mexican people to have self-determination, and it recruited its followers to join in the protests. The group's rallying call is the flag of Aztlan, a mythical homeland of the Aztecs in the southwestern United States. Mythical, all right. There was practically nobody in the southwestern part of the United States. There were American Indians there. Certainly, Aztecs were very thin on the ground in the southwestern part of the United States. An individual associated with the organization spoke at the rally, said, they're going to find out we don't play games. We're no longer going to be on the defense. We're going to take the fight to them. He said of ICE agents. Okay, they're going to attack ICE agents. Great. Bring it on. Another ethnic separatist group that joined the protest effort is Unión del Barrio. Barrio, by the way, is the Hispanic American word for the neighborhood. That's the Hispanic neighborhood. That's the Mexican neighborhood. That's living in the barrio. That's like living in the hood. And this group calls the United States an illegal settler nation, and it agitates on behalf of La Raza, the race. Unión del Barrio considers itself an international racial organization that fights against European colonialism and the Anglo-settler. That's me and you, Mr. Kersey, Anglo-settlers. It calls for international racial unity to overthrow European colonialism. And the United States is part of the neo-colonialist undertaking. One of the organization's community organizers is Ron Gochel, a teacher in the LA Unified School District who charges that frail, racist white people want to keep Hispanics out of the United States. Well, I think those ICE officers are probably not frail, racist white people. They are probably fairly fit lads. Many of them are Hispanics, actually. I remember being surprised at the number of ICE officers who are Hispanic. I believe there are probably more Hispanic ICE officers than there are gringo ICE officers. In any case, he says frail, racist white people want to keep Hispanics out. Now, there are Marxist organizations that have pitched in to organize against ICE. The protests were advertised by Refuse Fascism LA. That is a far-left organization that hands out propaganda created by RevCom, the Revolutionary Communist Party. It's against what it calls the Trump fascist regime. Well, what do you know? Just one last little thing before we get on to one of your rather surprising stories. So actually, it's not so surprising. And this was the fact that there's a growing call all around the U.S., loud, unapologetic, and in certain quarters, long overdue, to end all third world immigration. It started with a post from conservative podcaster Matt Walsh, where he said, "We can't be the world's soup kitchen anymore. Ban all third world immigration, legal or illegal," says he. And Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA, he took up the call and he said, basically, sorry, we're full. We need a net zero immigration moratorium with a ban on all third worlders. Well, Mr. Kersey, I think this is quite marvelous. We have been saying the same thing for many years, and the more people start saying it, the better. Better late than never. By all means, keep all non-whites out. It's as simple as that. So, Mr. Kersey, you had a report on DEI in the defense industry.
I did. This actually just broke today. This is from Chris Rufo, who I think is one of the absolute stalwart investigators and individuals who's really taken a hammer to the whole DEI, the concept of DEI, and just done extraordinary work. Whistleblower, Lockheed Martin awarded bonuses based on race. Company allegedly required managers to reward employees on the basis of their skin color alone and contrary to documented performance. Again, this is just a glimpse into what it's like to work in the for a Fortune 500 company, Mr. Taylor, because how many other companies have we talked about that Chris Rufo has spent the past 4 or 5 years doing detailed, exhaustive research into that just shows that discrimination against whites is the standard operating procedure. Oh, did I lose you? Mr. Taylor?
Still here.
Oh,
Jabber away, yes.
Oh, God, I was hoping you were going to answer.
Yes.
Many believe that masculine industries such as the military and defense are naturally immune to left-wing race and gender ideologies. This is mostly a myth. These institutions are organized according to prestige and profit. When those signals point to woke, industry leaders have dutifully followed. Great writing. Largest defense contractor, Lockheed Martin. As we have previously reported, after the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, they adopted radical DEI policies, requiring white men in leadership positions to attend a racial re-education program and atone for their white male privilege. I remember we actually talked about that. Now, a whistleblower has come forward to claim that Lockheed Martin executives were so committed to DEI policies that they awarded some year-end bonuses based on employee skin color rather than performance. This, of course, is an open violation of civil rights law. Story begins back in 2022, when the whistleblower was preparing recommendations for the Aeronautics Division's year-end bonuses. They were proud of the work of the team that had done to calculate the awards, but soon after the bonuses were submitted for approval, higher-ups told them that there was a problem. The comp adder list, which named recipients of bonus compensation, had too many white employees on it. Santiago Bulnes, a vice president who now leads engineering on Lockheed's F-35 program, wrote an email to the whistleblower. Quote, "I got a call from HR, LaWanda Moore, last night regarding diversity stats on comp adder. Bulnes, who did not respond to requests for comment, said, they took a run at getting your few approved and were told that we need to fit in the box. I asked her to send you the list of diversity names to simplify the task, finding the best in the group, i.e., find as many non-whites as you can." The source claims that Lockheed's HR department made the demand explicit. One communication instructed the whistleblower to add more than a dozen minorities to the list and recommended removing an equal number of non-minority employees. Implication being clear: increasing people of color for comp adder will result in removing equal count of non-minority. And the instructions were deliberate, recommending specific race swaps by manager. For example, for one team, HR officials instructed the whistleblower to, quote, increase POC 4 and decrease non-minority 4. So that means, ladies and gentlemen, people of color add 4, not white people subtract 4. Again, the driving force behind Lockheed's discriminatory policy, according to our source, was LaWanda Moore, the director of HR. When the whistleblower asked her, by the way, she's black, in case you didn't know, who did not respond to requests for comment. What would happen if the team could not find enough minorities to replace white workers on the bonus list? The wonderful LaWanda Moore responded forcefully, quote, "The preference is for you to get there. If you are coming back and saying you can't get there and it's unnatural, then I think that changes the conversation as a business area. What risk are we willing to assume? And should we get into a situation where there's a legal activity that takes place, then you will be part of that process. We haven't ever been in a situation where we haven't gotten there."
That's right. The whole company says, yes, ma'am, LaWanda, when she issues the orders. You'd be the first. You'd be the first disobedient white man. So the correct answer is, yes, massa.
The correct answer is, shut up, Whitey, get in line, and do as you're told. Now, Rufo says that last comment was worth highlighting because it suggests that there was a time that this wasn't the first time Lockheed had engaged in a secret post-hoc process to strip bonuses from top performers and instead award employees who check diversity boxes. And in the preceding sentence, Moore seems to acknowledge that such policies, which are inherently discriminatory, hey, they could violate law, but apparently the company's commitment to diversity trumped any other consideration. Now, based on what just happened with Ames versus Ohio last week, where the Supreme Court ruled 9-0, making it easier for white people not to have a burden of proof when they say they're discriminated against, I would say that there is a substantial chance we'll see a class action lawsuit against Lockheed Martin. So,
well, we'll see. I don't know what the statute of limitations is on this kind of thing. I think it's 4 or 5 years. But when was all of this going on, according to the whistleblower? Do you know?
2022.
Well, then it's probably within the statute of limitations. And, I introduced your story by saying this is surprising, and then I corrected myself. No, not surprising at all. This is precisely the kind of thing we've seen throughout the government, throughout every big company, not just the big companies that deal with the government. In this case, perhaps it's a little surprising because it was just so explicit. But let us hope this stuff is coming to an end. There are more and more people who are ready, as this whistleblower was, to call it to the attention of the entire world and call it what it is, discrimination against white people.
We've actually, by the way, if any of our listeners out there have ever sat in one of these meetings where you're basically lambasted and this is the type of stuff that you're told in a middle management or management position or C-suite, don't be afraid to share it. We'll get it into the hands of someone who can help and blast that out and bring attention to it. This is one of the biggest stories. I mean, look, there's a lot of news going on right now, Mr. Taylor. Everybody's focused on illegal immigration, but we also have a situation where there are vast amounts of employers who have engaged in this woke DEI anti-white way of doing business. And that has stymied the career of white men in general.
I'm sure when it comes to enormous companies like Lockheed, more have done that than haven't done that. It's probably hardly a single one that never did that.
Exactly.
This has been widespread. Well, let's see. Well, here's a different story. It has to do with Christianity. You've heard of Hilaire Belloc, have you not? He was a Catholic essayist. He also wrote quite amusing poetry.
Right, the faith is Europe. Europe is the faith, I believe, is his famous
That's line. The man. The faith is Europe. Europe is the faith. Well, not anymore. Europe now contains only 22.3% of the world's Christians. The largest number of Christians, that is to say 30.7% of them, that's 31%, are in Black Africa. So 22% Europe, 31% in Black Africa, and while we're at it, in Latin America, 24%. So there are more Christians in Latin America than in Europe and more Christians in Black Africa. Again, gosh, and that was in 1920. 100 years ago, the faith is Europe and Europe is the faith. Now, Europe is only 22.3% of the faith, Mr. Belloc. Things are rapidly changing. I think for sure we will have a non-white pope ere long. Now, let's see. This is another story. I think this is a remarkable story for our times.
Mr. Taylor, it should be argued. Some people would say we already have one based on the Pope having Creole ancestry.
Well, it doesn't look particularly black to me.
No, it does not.
And he has some slight Haitian ancestry. I don't really know that much about him. I just saw an article in which I believe it was either the Times or the Post had gone to the trouble to get some sort of professional ancestry digger-upper to find out just how far back he goes and what he is. And they had people from just all around. And I believe they had only one or two, obviously, non-white folks. But we'll see. In any case, these days, it doesn't make any difference whether you're black or white. You can be exceedingly anti-white no matter where you're from, alas. But let's see, this is a story for our era. An Amber Alert for Nola Dinkins was abruptly canceled just yesterday after officials in Maryland said they believe that her mother, Darian Randall, 31 and African Americanist, fabricated an abduction story. The alert for the missing girl had been issued the day before after mother claimed a white couple kidnapped her daughter, her 3-year-old daughter, at gunpoint. A description of a bald white man, about 40 years old, with a patch of peach fuzz on his head, as Darian Randall explained, that was put out to law enforcement across the state, and Randall reportedly said the man took off with a blonde white woman in a car. Of course, there has to be a blonde woman involved in this abduction. The FBI joined for the search for young 3-year-old Nola. Well, search teams had been all around Gender Road in North Delaware, where Nola's mother told police the kidnapping took place. Gender Road. That's an appropriate setting for a crime of this kind. Well, now, this is a sad part of it. The toddler appears to have been found dead. So this African Americanist looks likely to go to the big house for murder. Now, who could have possibly believed her story? Mama says she just happened to pull over on the side of the road to talk to her child, who was apparently requiring attention, when out pops a white couple and they pull a gun and they make off with her 3-year-old black daughter. How likely is that, Mr. Kersey? That just seems so preposterously unlikely.
It does, yes.
Yes, but I guess anything can happen. Anything can happen in this racist, systemically white supremacist world. No telling about white couples wanting black toddlers. They take them home, and what are they going to do with them? Drink their blood? Who knows? But in any case, no, apparently Mama killed her child and blamed it on a blonde white woman and her companion.
The demand for white people abducting black babies definitely exceeds the supply. Unless you're watching a Hollywood film, there's a
Yes.
It's something you should actually read. It's called Lovecraft Country. They made a TV miniseries based off of this book called it's based on just how awful white fiction is and how racist white fiction is historically. Obviously, the name Lovecraft Country comes from H.P. Lovecraft. It goes on to just attack basically the history of America's literary history and how all of our past comes to life within the foundation of this story.
Well,
but I doubt you'll read it. It's not worth reading. So
good. Phew, I was getting worried here. Well, let's see. Now, this is yet another story for our times, and this one comes from Canada. A Peel regional police officer, this is Canada, engaged in the racial profiling of a black motorist as an example of a systemic problem within the service. A judge has ruled. It's a systemic and intractable problem, says she. She is Superior Court Justice Renu Mandane. She's from India. And it's the case of Constable Anand Gandhi, also from India. He apparently stopped a Jeep in Brampton after an automated license plate reader on his cruiser detected that the owner of the Jeep faces drug charges and had his license suspended. Well, Constable Gandhi arrested and handcuffed the black male owner of the Jeep, called for backup, ordered a baseless search of the vehicle, and detained the driver for 90 minutes. Whereas earlier the same day, Constable Gandhi, had stopped another suspended motorist, this time a white female driver, and simply issued a ticket. Obvious racial profiling. Well, in her ruling, Judge Mandane accepted that fellow Indian Gandhi didn't believe that he was treating the black male driver any differently because of race. However, he, in her words, was influenced by his unconscious racial biases. I guess as one Indian speaking about other Indians, she knows all about Indian unconscious racial biases. But of course, we all know that non-whites learn this kind of awful thinking only from white people. They set foot in a place like Canada and instantly become infected by the virus of racism, which was practiced originally and exclusively by white people, but it jumps to them. And so he has unconscious racial biases, and he was suffering from them when he decided how to treat the driver who was in his mid-30s. The officer, and I'm still quoting from the Indian judge's ruling, then relied on stereotypes about black people being more prone to criminality to illegally search his Jeep. Now, Judge Van Dane previously served as Chief Commissioner of the Ontario Human Rights Commission and headed up a lengthy inquiry into racial discrimination by the Toronto Police Service. So she knows all about systemic racism. And as a result, and I've saved the best to the end, Mr. Kersey, this means that the unlicensed rifle that was found underneath a mat in the cargo area of the Jeep must be excluded from evidence, says our wise Indian judge, because systemic anti-Black racism in law enforcement undermines the administration of justice. The man must be acquitted on all charges. Now, this is just so hilarious on all counts. Here you have an Indian constable who made probably a very intelligent decision. Here's a young Black guy. He's got a suspended license. He's what else is he facing? Drug charges. I think I'll take a look inside. Lo and behold, he finds an unlicensed rifle. And that's bad news in Canada. And then this other Indian says, "Oh, no. You let a white lady go. And so you were practicing illegal racial profiling. And so, yes, your hunch was correct, but because it was based on race, no, you can't do that." So here's this Indian telling us how we need to run our countries. That's, as I say, it's a story for our times. Now, Mr. Kersey, you have another story for our times. This is a guy whom I do not think worth much attention, but apparently you do. So tell us, what's up with David Hogg? I remember when he came to prominence, and all I could think of him was, this is some inconsequential young twit, but he's still in the news.
Well, he's a fellow Ivy Leaguer. So he's
gracious.
Now the embattled DNC vice chair has decided not to run after diversity revote called. Again, I don't think he's worth paying attention to, except for what happened to his position of leadership because of him having to be a white male. Now, he's the 25-year-old progressive firebrand. He's not going to compete in the new Democrat National Committee vice chair elections that were decided today after a majority of members voted for a new election. After 3 days of submitting electronic ballots, DNC members voted to uphold the Credentials Committee's resolution proposed by longtime activist Kalen Free to host a re-election for 2 vice chair positions.
Well, so hold on. So sorry. So he was originally elected?
He was.
I see. And so he is voluntarily stepping down.
He decides not to run. I believe he was removed. Let's go with the story. So give me a second here.
Well,
75% of those who cast a ballot voted in favor of the resolution.
Which resolution?
To host a re-election for the 2 vice chairs.
Okay.
So with Hogg withdrawing, Kenyatta is now the only candidate for the male vice chair slot.
Kenyatta.
Yeah,
that does not sound like a white man.
No, Malcolm Kenyatta. The DNC's decision is the latest blow to Hogg, who stirred up intra-party divisions this year for his $20 million pledge to support primary challenges against older House Dems in safe blue districts, who he said were asleep at the wheel. So he published a lengthy Twitter post, X post, explaining his decision not to run for re-election and criticizing many aspects of the Democrat Party, but deleted it shortly after posting. His decision to leave the DNC comes on the heels of a damning Politico report, which included audio from a Zoom, which included the DNC chair Ken Martin lamenting Hogg's fall at the DNC, claiming that it has made it harder for Democrats to do their job and for Martin to demonstrate his ability to lead.
Martin, that's Kenyatta?
No, this is one of the other people who was asking for him to withdraw.
So this Hogg guy, he says all the older Democrats are a bunch of old fuddy-duddies, and we're going to challenge them in the primaries and safe districts so we can get firebrands like me in office rather than these limp-wristed old loser old people.
Well, that and the fact that they don't want a white guy in that position. So that's one of the things that we've seen a number of times reported on Twitter, that they're removing him, because I believe this position actually was because he is the face. He's one of the most predominant white individuals in the Democrat Party. And for him to be asked to remove because of a lack of diversity or too much whiteness within him.
Well, it sounds like there are other reasons too, that he says that he's making life difficult for the Democrat Party. Well, anyway, I'm confused, but sounds like this is a sort of a murkily written story anyway.
It's one of the stories where they buried the lead, where in reality the situation is because, again, they need more diversity, and you just can't have, what is the future of the Democrat Party at this point? It's tipped. I mean, it's basically, as Peter Brumlow says, Mr. Taylor, it is the Black Party, increasingly Hispanic. And I guess Gavin Newsom is pretty much the most popular Democrat white guy. So,
all right. So poor Hogg is out the door. How old is he now?
Hogg is 25.
25. Well, he's got many years of being a pest left to him on this earth. Okay, well, let's see. What else we got? Philadelphia schools. This is quite an interesting story. The school district is among the largest in the country. It has over 200,000 students across 331 schools. Israel Jimenez is its director of social studies curriculum, and he said last year that the curriculum emphasizes multi-prospectivity and dialectical thinking involving marginalized and historically excluded voices. Multi-prospectivity. That sounds like you're, I don't know, panning for gold and silver, multi-prospecting. In March, Jimenez said in an Instagram post that educators are agents of change. Every child should walk into a classroom and feel the revolution stirring in the air, because that's what real education is. Got that? Feel revolution stirring in the air. Jimenez, clearly not a Mayflower descendant, has also posted an image of the American flag being thrown into a trash basket. An African American history assignment that he set up asks students to select a song to replace the national anthem after critically examining race and racism. Now, if you were black, what do you think an appropriate replacement for the national anthem would be? I remember that doesn't the city of
Every voice
Atlanta.
and sing.
That's too tame. That's kind of a nice song, really. Have you ever read the lyrics of it? It's really rather hopeful. It's very Christian. It talks about moving forward and we are going to go ahead under our own steam. You don't get the impression they want handouts. It's really quite, no, it's a shockingly reasonable and uplifting song. So I don't think that's appropriate at all. You remember when Atlanta, it came up with a city theme song called the ATL. Do you remember that? And there were only 3 words in it, as I recall, that ordinary speakers of English could understand. It was something like, get it up, blah, 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 blah. But that sounds good to me. That
I
should
vaguely
be.
remember that. It's one of those memories you try and erase. And thank you for restoring that memory as you recited those wonderful rap lyrics of
Yeah, it's
ATL.
something like that. The ATL, yes. No, white people were utterly baffled because they couldn't understand any of it except for I think it was Get It Up. Or in any case. Also, this guy Jimenez, the social studies curriculum says that when you learn about the Civil War, students should come away with an understanding that racist attitudes played a fundamental role in the formation of American identity and the development of American foreign policy must be studied through the lens of race and racism. You know, that's something about these progressives. They've always got lenses. They're looking at things through the lens of phallocracy or white supremacy. They've got lenses. Then the unit in world history teaches that economic inequality shows the need for systemic changes in equitable economic policies, and the unit examines the intersections of climate justice, economic justice, anti-fascism, and human rights. Now, I'm a little bit curious as to how all those things go together. Climate justice, human rights, and anti-fascism? Okay. Well, you won't be surprised to know, Mr. Kersey, that Philadelphia students perform far below national and state standards on reading and math because they're just being stuffed with all this anti-white nonsense.
But they took the Frank Rizzo statue down. That can't be.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Frank Rizzo. Well, he was a bad man, but he was white, so he was inherently bad. Nearly half of Philadelphia's public school students are black, and more than 20% are English language learners. I wonder how many of the blacks are English language learners. I mean, they probably think they speak English, but they should be learning the language. Okay, let's see. Now, Mr. Kersey, oh boy, we are running out of time. I think, have you got enough time to talk about the South African Navy?
I'll tell you what. Let's hold that one for next week because that's the story we missed. It is funny, I think, to talk about very, very quickly what's going on in Martha's Vineyard, and we'll be fast
by all means, Martha's Vineyard. Speak to us as Martha's Vineyard. Very good.
Martha's Vineyard residents are unhappy with Trump deporting the illegal immigrants from their liberal enclave, the Washington Post reported this week. The Massachusetts community has been reeling since ICE officers arrested dozens of illegals in a recent raid, according to the WAPO report. It's bullying, one Martha's Vineyard resident, Charles Giordano, told the Post. I don't know how many are illegal or legal. I don't give a shit, but I do care about how they're treated. Well, the Washington Post story on the Martha's Vineyard ICE raid comes as the federal law enforcement agency has been the focus of riot coverage in downtown LA for the past several days. As the Post reported, ICE agents performed a massive sting throughout Massachusetts in late May that resulted in nearly 1,500 arrests. 40 of those arrests happened on 2 islands of Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. Beautiful areas, by the way. I've been there. Beautiful area.
Yeah.
The arrests have ignited fear among undocumented workers who form the backbone of the workforce here, just as the busy summer season gets underway, the outlet reported. After the
Ah,
raid, many immigrants panicked and shuttered themselves indoors. Many spoke to the WAPO only on the condition of anonymity because they fear being targeted the next time ICE arrives on the island. They recounted taking extraordinary measures that day and in the week after to protect themselves, the Post said, adding that the liberal community in the island had been shaken as well. Quote, the arrest hit a nerve in a liberal enclave known for welcoming everyone, presidents. Former President Barack Obama has an oceanfront property here. LGBTQ plus activists, racial minorities, celebrities, and a large cluster of immigrants from Brazil. One Brazilian president who admitted to the Post he's undocumented warned that the local economy will crater because of the arrests and deportations. The anonymous man, who also owns 3 businesses in Martha's Vineyard, said, the money's just going to stop flowing. The U.S. is only losing and pushing us out. Now, the island has become a safe haven for many illegal immigrants from Brazil in recent decades, apparently, as they fled their home country due to hyperinflation and other economic problems. According to this outlet, many come here on work visas but end up staying in the country and overstaying them. The Post reported these immigrants established business offering food and cleaning services that are now crucial to daily life in a resort town.
crucial. In other words, people will starve to death because they are not there anymore.
Yeah, today there are a few restaurant menus here that don't offer Brazilian-inspired options like croquettes or traditional cheesy bread. I've never had either of those. I never want to. So if I want that, I'd go to Rio de Janeiro or somewhere else in Latin America. But what's interesting is this article omits, Mr. Taylor. I think the funniest aspect is that about 2 years ago, I believe it was Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis who sent a couple busloads of illegals up to Martha's Vineyard.
I think they flew them up, didn't they?
Did they fly them up? It was one of the two. It was they either flew them or they took buses and then dropped them off. And then within the day, there were a number of Martha's Vineyard residents who protested this importation of illegals. And the National Guard was called out by the governor of Massachusetts to round them up and get them out. And yet here you have the exact opposite happening. You have ICE coming in and raiding these areas where there are illegals employed. I guess some illegals are more equal than others, to quote George Orwell in this case.
All of 40 have been deported from Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard?
There were 1,500, yes, sir, who were
No, that's Massachusetts.
Massachusetts,
yeah,
but
that's
only
a big
40 on these in Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, and the economy's going to grind to a halt. People will starve. No one will know how to feed himself without Brazilians there to put food in their mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Who's going to clean the kitchen? Who's going to sweep the floor, do the dishes, vacuum the various rooms, the cottages that are on Airbnb? It's such a laughable story because, and this is the most important thing to tell our listeners, you're going to start seeing so many stories like this of employers who have for years hired illegal aliens, and now they're upset that they can't find the same, or they can't continue to employ illegal aliens. And, they should be arrested too because they've willingly violated the law.
Yes, I have been expecting all of this kind of opposition. And now you were suggesting that people not show up at these, No Kings rallies? I'd be curious to go in and see what they're like. I think I can probably manage not to get stabbed or flashbanged or who knows. But I'd be curious to see what the atmosphere is like. Washington, D.C. is going to be one of the places where it's going to happen, right?
Well, I would encourage people not to go counter-protest.
Oh, no. Just observe. Just observe.
Yeah, to observe. Yes. I think it's interesting to observe people who are trying, who are advocating for individuals who violate our sovereignty. Yes,
that's right.
That's fine. Right. But at the same time, there's no need. Allow these pictures to come out. I mean, again, we've seen Seattle, Atlanta, Los Angeles. We've seen violence already in a lot of places across the country. So just stay away from that. Let it all play out.
Well, I think it'd be very edifying. If I go, I will let you know. But usually I have better things to do on the weekend than to watch people avidly and actively encouraging illegals to break our laws. But
it'd be funny if you went to Home Depot or Lowe's, Mr. Taylor, and instead saw an ICE raid.
Well, I've been to many Home Depots, never saw an ICE raid, but yes, the chances of that are getting better and better. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have run out of time. And thank you, Mr. Kersey, for your help, your indispensable help on this. And thank you, our audience, for spending this time with us. It is an honor and a joy for us. We look forward to doing the same thing next week. Thank you very, very much.